So, going into the essay about the data analysis process, I did not know anything about the difference between inductive process and inductive process. So, it was really interesting to further learn about and investigate. First off, starting with the deductive process, this is something that specifically tests a theory. This is very streamlined. There's a direct question. Specifically, the example that was given is fraud present? So, this is something that's very a little bit more narrow, could be broad as well, but it's a more of a guiding question. The steps in going through and conducting this analysis include five, which were outlined. The first being identify the question of interest. Secondly, identifying the data or the methodology. Third, extracting and cleaning the data. Four, analyzing data. And five, communicating the findings. When looking at explanatory or inductive, this is more exploring and seeing what the data tells us. Humans, were limited by our imagination and ability to see what could result, whereas machines, this is really where AI is greatly expanding this area, is they have the endless ability to expand loads and loads and loads of data. So the downfall of this is that through that analysis, no matter what, AI is capable of finding patterns. So it's up to us to see if there's meaningful connections and relationships that have been analyzed and brought to surface through that type of analysis. But really, can be complementary to the deductive process, as you can kind of be more open-ended and narrow things down to kind of ask later specific questions. So they're, although different inherently, they can be paired together really beneficially. So moving on to type 1 and type 2 error, I feel like this has brought me back to knowing about this, I feel, since middle school, going into just like scientific tests that we used to do in primary school, and then thinking about how now it's applied. So a type 1 error is typically less lethal than a type 2 error, in the sense that you say something is true when it isn't. So we say specifically, like an example would be in accounting, to say that fraud is present or a misstatement is present when it is not. In a type 2 error, we would think it's kind of the opposite, and it's a little bit bigger consequences can come from this, because we would say there is no misstatement present when there is. So that could potentially lead to much bigger repercussions when you say that something is not present when it is, such as a misstatement, fraud, the list kind of goes on. But yeah, those are really big things to consider as we go into practice and looking out for those type 2 errors, especially type 1 as well, but those type 2 errors are really lethal. So two other important points that I pulled from the analysis essay was, first off, the skill set currently given the data and analytics label is nothing new. This brings me right back to the last module where we looked at early graphs and early statistical records from Florence Nightingale and the other individuals. This is nothing new. This has just been built on over time as our data collection and data presentation has expanded. I also was interested in kind of going through thinking about deductive analytics as being agenda-driven. This does make sense to me. I just didn't really think about that, as it's a little more structured. This feels a little bit more something that us as accountants would be inclined to doing. And I think that can be a thought-provoking thing that came from this, is just thinking about breaking that barrier. I know, kind of moving on to this last question, I am someone that struggles with being creative in asking questions and building these types of outlines and data sets. So for me, especially as being an accountant-minded person, thinking about coupling that with an exploratory mindset is going to be really big. So as I go into my career, that's basically the question that I would kind of put a lot of my focus into. So being exploratory when I am identifying a question of interest, for me, I think it can be really hard to kind of narrow that down and be like, where should I look? Where am I going? What am I finding? And struggling to be creative in these avenues that I investigate. I think I'm someone who can get a little bit narrow and can think, although feel I'm thinking critically in these questions, I think I need to have a bit more supplement to kind of push on and spur on my creativity. I think this is able to be combated through consulting with my coworkers, consulting with other professionals, and also utilizing new tools. I know we've talked about a lot, really, it feels repetitive at this point, but just reliance on AI, although that's not something I want to do. I think it's a really good avenue to just kind of spark creativity, throw your thoughts down on there, see what it gives back. Engage in a conversation with one of those large language models, because I think it is really useful and an interesting tool to kind of just push you forward and spur you on. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed learning about the data analysis process, and I'm curious to see how these ideas and methodology will continue to be applied in not only my academic career, but my professional career.